Hello and welcome to the CHQ Assembly. We are here with singer-songwriter Amythyst Kiah, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you back to Chautauqua Institution.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back again. This is so much fun.
The sun is shining. It's great to have you here. So this morning, I was just mentioning to you, I looked at Facebook, and sure enough, to the date, 2 years ago, my Facebook memories came up with this gorgeous picture of 4 amazing women, Rhiannon, Layla, Allison, Amythyst. 2 years ago, you were here with Our Native Daughters. So from there, everyone is doing all the solo work. But tell me a little bit about your first trip here with Our Native Daughters, and what do you even remember about Chautauqua Institution, and what resonated with you?
Well, I hate to say it, but it was kind of a blur a little bit.
It is on tour.
Yeah, because it was like, there was like, a big team of us, and everybody brought their kids, so everything was just sort of, things just kind of were going by very quickly. But I do remember me and the sound guy that was with us. His name is Frank. We took a really nice long walk around the lake and just talked and hung out. So I always remember things like that when I'm on tour, because when you go from city to city, sometimes I do enjoy cities, but I grew up in East Tennessee. I grew up around mountains, and so anytime I'm in a place outdoors, in between all those city gigs, it's always really refreshing, and it's kind of like getting a restart. So that's what I remember most about, obviously the performance, and everybody was amazing, of course, but yeah, that was a little window of time that was able to sort of kind of chill out and reset. So it was great.
That's actually really beautiful, because that's what Chautauqua is about, is that window of time. Some people can take that window for a whole summer, and some can only take it for a weekend. Mm-hmm. But it's supposed to be a place of reflection and going a little deeper, but also having some rest. And I also remember lots of nannies and lots of kids.
Yes. Yes, they were wrangling in all the children at all times, and they managed it so well and did such a great job.
It was happy chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, exactly. So from Happy Chaos, from that amazing tour and Smithsonian Folkways and the album, I look at, I think of you as these super women. And Allison Russell is coming to Chautauqua this season as well. Of course, Rhiannon Giddens has been here at different times. Mm-hmm. And just even looking at your career, the solo artistry has just taken off. And can you tell us a little bit about this path to the solo explosion that is you?
Well, I've been performing mostly solo shows since 2010. I was in school band at East Tennessee State University, so that's where I really got my start, getting my feet wet in performing. And then I started playing solo shows around the region. And then between that and just slowly moving further and further out of the region and starting to play different places here and there. And then I had the opportunity to play a festival in Scotland in 2014. And then I ended up started working with a booking agent. So I started touring, having actual tours in the UK before really having tours here. Because here it was sort of a lot of weekend stuff. And also I was in college at the time too, so I couldn't really do week-long stuff. So my first real experience with touring for longer than 2-3 days at a time was in the UK. So then in 2016, right where I was at the cusp of if I can't start really supporting myself full-time with this, I might have to think about something else, because it was just starting to get, financially, things were just starting to kind of, close in. And I was in the airport in Newark, New Jersey. I was getting ready to fly to Edinburgh to play a show there. And I got a call from a dear friend of mine named Charlene Baker. She was kind of acting as manager / booker for me, kind of like part-time. And she called me on the phone and she said, hey, Rhiannon Giddens' agent just sent an email and she wants you to open for her. And I was like, what? I'm like standing there with like my gear on my back, and I'm just like, what the heck is going on? So yeah, so that was really the beginning.
Did you know each other?
We had met a couple of times, but both times it was sort of like at a festival, and it was very much like passing. So, I mean, we never really like connected in that way. And she didn't know like who I was or that I played music or anything like that. So, so it was just interesting, like, and the way that she found out about me, as a musician was she saw a video on YouTube of me performing at Cambridge Folk Festival. So, like, so it's like, and it seems like every turning point of my career that's happened, it's been because someone saw a video. So, so video has definitely played a huge role in everything, as we can see now with like TikTok and, YouTube and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so that was like the beginning of that, of finally like, and making these really important breaks kind of leading up to now. So really since like 2016, there's been a steady, like, instead of kind of moving sort of this way, it was moving more up. And yeah, so.
Yeah, it just seems like, so you've had this trajectory, but it still feels like there's something a little volcanic about the moment with Wary and Strange.
And what made it so volcanic is, I think a big role of it had to do with, during 2020, I mean, it was just my job every day. I was working from home. I'd wake up and like make videos to send to like festivals and venues. Like that was my job for like a year and a half, and with some occasional live streams. So yeah, my whole job, I was working from home, and so, I mean, I had time to reflect during that time, because the first, month or two of the shutdown and all of the gigs disappeared, I had an existential crisis, because I had built my entire past, like, 5 or 6 years was centered around being a touring musician, with, getting every opportunity I could, with, like, all of it was so focused and centered on that. And so for all those gigs to disappear, it made me realize that there's actually, I had to get back in touch with, like, who I am, and like, cause like hobbies and interests that I'd had, like, I just, I didn't really make any time for like work-life balance, which, for some people that might be weird to say, well, you're a musician. How do you love what you do? Why do you need work-life balance? And it's not the music making part that's like necessarily the work. It's like everything else, because essentially when you decide you want to do music professionally, you become like, you're like a small business. You're an entrepreneur. So if you want to make a living at it, there are all these other factors. There's marketing. There's there's tour managing. There's so many different things that go into it. So
that's one of the biggest things. At Chautauqua Institution, we have schools performing in visual arts, and we have so many faculty that end up talking to their students about the art is one part. The art ends up being a pretty small percent of your life when you think of the touring, the travel, the readying, the talking, the managing.
Oh, yeah.
That it's like by the time you get on stage, that's probably the joy.
Right.
But that wasn't what you've been doing all week.
Right, exactly. So to have, all this year and a half of like, I work from like, like from 10 to 5 or 10 to 6 of like doing my videos, and then after that, like I got back into video games, so I started playing video games, or I was actually able to start going to the gym and work out like 5 days a week. Like I was getting into weightlifting and like getting into like hiking, and I was starting to get back into and also just doing a lot of walking in general. And so I like spent a lot of time just like getting that work-life balance together. So when things started to open up again, and also with the album campaign starting up, it's my first time ever you know, being on a record label and having a PR team. And the thing about a PR team is when they do their job really well, you get offers that are all good, and you can, I mean, you could turn the offers down, but you'd be crazy to do it. So you have to be, or on the other hand, you may be crazier for trying to do it all. But that's kind of like, that's what it takes. You have to like establish that foothold, because not very many artists get the opportunity that I've gotten. And, you know, I talked a lot with my management about this, because there were certain moments, you know, going from, I'm working my 9 to 5, I go to the gym 5 days a week, and play video games at night, to like interviews almost all day. And then I also still had some leftover like video stuff I needed to record. And I was getting like offers to take over, you know, different like, you know, accounts on Instagram. So as you can imagine, it just went from 0 to 100 in a very small window. So the explosion definitely feels, even though this was a gradual build to this moment, like there was definitely that feeling of like, bam, all right, now you're on tour again, but you're also promoting your album in a way that you've never promoted it before, because everybody's doing a great job, you know.
And you're on TV a lot.
Yeah, you know, like with all the national TV appearances, and so like, you know, and what I was told is that fortunately, it only gets super crazy like that during album cycles, so it's not always going to be like how it was. So that gave me a little bit of relief, because it is very difficult to manage all of those things. But I think the big thing for me is, if I didn't have the team of people that I did, I absolutely would not have been able to do everything that I did. I mean, that was what was so important about it, is even though, yes, there were some times where it was like, you know, either go to sleep or drink coffee to finish something, like, that was something that I wasn't really used to doing anymore. It absolutely was worth it, because establishing everything in these moments is so important, because, you know, the music and the message that I want to be out into the world, like, that's what all of this is for, you know. So at the end of the day, you know, I feel like it was in a way a rite of passage. You know, I talked with Yola, who's another amazing singer-songwriter and a longtime friend, and Allison, about their album cycles, and they're both like, oh yeah, at one point we've all you know, curled up in fetal position crying because of like the pressure. Not that we don't appreciate the opportunities, but just the pressure to like be able to do all of the things. So it's like a rite of passage in a lot of ways, and I'm happy that I was able to make it through mine, and and getting to do this, which has been my dream. So
yeah.
Well,
so that's interesting to hear, because I thought, just kind of watching you, it looks like this explosion of activity. So now we know it felt like that too.
Yeah, it did feel like, yeah, it absolutely did. Yeah.
But in Wary and Strange, I just started noticing, as you as an artist, that it seems you are more and more, not just comfortable, but more and more purposefully serving as an advocate for ideas and concepts much bigger than the music itself. That your music has always been, to a point, to represent something. It's always been very emotional. Like, I think a lot of people find solace in it because you've been through something, and if we've been through it, we can hear that in your music. Mm-hmm. But now you are out talking about really important things. And I would love to hear a little bit more. You said the message of Wary and Strange is what's important. What do you feel the messages are in that, and what has pushed you as an artist and a human to be representing issues that just seem so critically important right now?
Well, I had a certain period in time, and this was mostly in my 20s, when I moved to Johnson City, Tennessee, and started getting into old time music. And I was in that community, and was also very hyper aware of a lot of like closed-mindedness that can be in the sphere of traditional music. So for me, I sort of had like a shut up and sing policy for a really long time. I mean, I had like a lot of my friends were like women's studies majors and like, you know, just really liberal. And, you know, we had all, you know, I just really aligned, our values really aligned very well. But I found that I was afraid to like incorporate any of that into my own songwriting.
You didn't bring that on stage.
Right,
even
exactly.
though it was in you.
Yes. So there was two different things going on. One, for me, I still hadn't really processed my mother's suicide when I was younger. So a lot of what was going on with me during those years was a lot of emotional repression and like disassociation. So my draw to create interpretations of existing music. At the time, I didn't realize that this was part of the reason. But on a deeper psychological level, it was a way for me to not have to write about or address my feelings. So for a really long time, it was just like, I'm just going to focus on these songs. These are wonderful songs. I'm learning so much. They're still resonating with me. But I just really shied away from, I didn't journal for a really long time. And there was just a really long extended period of time where like, I just didn't want to like face the pain that I was trying to hide. And also the fact that like, I identify as a queer person. And so, when I moved to Johnson City, I went back in the closet. And like, so for me, there was just so much of myself that I was just completely closing off because I didn't want to lose opportunities to play shows. I was already, being a person of color in traditional music and in that specific area was already like gonna be a bit of a challenge because there were people that didn't really, didn't think that I belonged, even though the history is very clear, the role of,
Yes.
West African
Yeah.
ancestry in, folk music. But so.
And yet you're in Tennessee.
Right, exactly. So what changed for me, as far as deciding to actually, and it was a very slow transition. I started going to therapy in 2016. So there was this slow unraveling of like all the things that I was insecure and afraid of. Like my fear of rejection was so intense that I would literally just stifle myself just so I wouldn't feel the bite of rejection. So it was just a lot of, psychological things going on with me that I had to like work through. So I started to slowly unravel all of this stuff and slowly start to really come into my own. And then Our Native Daughters was like the defining project in which I was like, you know what? I'm looking at our ancestors that survived the transatlantic voyage, if you can call it a voyage, I don't know, survived the Civil War, survived Reconstruction, survived segregation, survived the Civil Rights Movement. If I'm standing on those kind of shoulders of all these people before me that have survived, like, it is the least that I could do to write a song and talk about my experience. Like, all four of us have been given this amazing opportunity to like continue the legacy of fighting white supremacy. So like it was in that moment with Our Native Daughters, with us writing these songs, I was just like, there's nothing to be afraid of. That's the very last verse in Black Myself is, I'm surrounded by many loving artists because I'm Black myself. Like that was the moment of like, I can do this because I've got the love and support to be able to do this. I'm not alone. I don't have to fight this alone. So that was, because after many years of feeling kind of isolated and feeling alone, it was like to be able to get out of my head long enough to see, all the people around me that love me and support what I do was like just amazing. So, yeah.
Well, I have to say, and first of all, thank you for sharing that. But thank you for doing that. I think you talk about finding your own voice and feeling like I don't have to be afraid, but I think you also know that when you come forward as such a strong woman to sing that and be that, what you're impacting is a whole other generation and group of people that I think you give that even a bit of bravery to. If she can do it and she can say it and she can sing it, then maybe I can be not hiding, my hurt and my experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a big deal. I have young people in my life that their mother committed suicide about the same time as yours. Mm-hmm. And as an aunt, I'm sure many people as a parent, you are always looking for what can they relate to, right? Because they can't relate to the 10 people in their lives at school because they don't have the same experience.
Right.
But to be able to point to artists like yourselves to say, she went through this. And she's singing about it. And for them to be able to hear that in your music, it's a big, big deal for all sorts of issues. And I'm also, of course, we are at a time where we can't take for granted that we don't need to be fighting white supremacy.
Right.
We do.
Yeah, exactly.
And even acknowledgement about that of saying, okay, there is real power in the stage and in the microphone and in amplifying voice. You're doing really important work. Yeah. So Wearing Strange is out. You're at the top of this explosion of activity and being all over. What are your hopes for the coming year as far as what you hope to be doing as an artist?
It's kind of hard to think so far ahead at the moment because there's still so many things that are going to be happening like just within the next 2 or 3 months. A lot of really, really cool big things coming up, really cool festivals, and the Americana Music Awards is happening.
I was going to say, what are some of the things you're excited about that are in this?
Well, yeah. So I got nominated for at least for Americana Music Awards. I got nominated for Emerging Artist of the Year. Yeah. The Wearing Strange recording of Like Myself got nominated for Song of the Year, and then Our Native Daughters got nominated again for duo groups. So hopefully third time's a charm.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. You've got a whole group of Chautauquans.
Yeah, yeah.
Cheering for that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think with this record was like Wearing Strange is like the first step of me, finally allowing my, letting my inner voice come out. And, the album is really touching on like, mental health, relationships with substances, just, and trying to like navigate those things and learn from them and grow. And so that's what, because I think it's hard to be out and talk about important issues when you're so like trapped in your own head and your own mind with your self-doubts. And I'm not one of those people that thinks that like, there's this really popular, I don't know if it's popular, but there's a phrase that I've heard people say where they're like, you need to take care of, your own stuff before trying to get into other people's stuff. And usually that's said by people that don't really care about other people. Those are usually the people that make that comment. In other words, like, be quiet and like, if you have problems, you have no right to try to solve other people's problems. And it's really about, yes, there is like a certain bit of like, mental health, self-care that definitely needs to happen. But if you wait until every single problem in your life is solved, then you're never going to be helping anybody. So we're all like healing and learning, in our life. And that doesn't mean that you can't try to help other people, but you have to like realize that. And I've finally it's finally clicked for me. So, yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing it for yourself, but it's like you're inviting us to come with you. And there's a vulnerability about that I think so many people aren't necessarily willing or brave enough to show, because it takes real bravery to show that vulnerability.
It took a lot of years for me. So, yeah.
But the fact that you're putting it right out there and you're saying, come on.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Exactly.
Well, We're thrilled to have you back at Chautauqua. We are going to be watching your journey and cheering you on, you and our native daughters as well, as we look at some of those big things coming up in the next couple months. But congratulations on your album, and thanks for coming back to Chautauqua.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to be back, and this has been wonderful to sit and talk with you. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're so pleased to have Amythyst Kiah back here at Chautauqua Institution, and thank you for joining us on the CHQ Assembly.
CHQ Assembly is made possible through the collaboration and innovation of Chautauqua Institution's full-time and part-time staff, seasonal staff, and many volunteers, as well as participants like you, whose engagement, gifts, and subscriptions sustain our mission.